I might look down here and see what kind of treats there are down here, I guess, you know. They sure hung around that, didn't they, for a while? It is great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share some things about the children's home. But I first have to say, you guys are an incredible congregation. You know, I've been blessed to be able to go around and speak to, you know, smaller congregations and that, but, you know, your fellowship, how you interact with each other, it's obvious that you love each other. You know, it's just, the singing is wonderful. You guys are really blessed, you know, and that's all because of you, what you do, and how I know how God has blessed you. But I just want to encourage you, because it's an encouragement to me in the sense of seeing small congregations in regards to the talent and abilities and the love that you have. It's just, it's really encouraging. So keep it up. Keep it up. You know, it's just, it's a blessing to be here. So, well, I want to thank John for allowing me to, you know, take his time in regards to the pulpit, and also the eldership for allowing me to come and share some things about the children's home, and you know, it's just good to be here anyway. So I want to thank you for your involvement. I know some of the change cans have disappeared, so I appreciate that. Typically every fall, or spring into fall, I take a van and I pick up food. I come to Omaha, we network with a number of congregations there, and all the way back we just pick up food, and the van is just full. It probably turns into about a $12,000 food run. By the time we get back, we're pretty loaded, and just the congregations helping out what they can do, and also some of them help out with change cans. So that's kind of why I make this trip, and just networking with different congregations. And thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. So Mountain States Children's Home has been around since 1960. We're the farthest north Brotherhood Children's Home. There's nothing north or northwest of us. You go to the Canadian border or even out to Canada. So we're kind of unique in that sense of being able to minister to that area. But we get referrals from all over, especially with the website, and people calling in needing help for their children. So we appreciate your involvement. One of the things that I'm going to talk to you in regards today is just in regards to let no root of bitterness grow up within you. And I think most of you there's a handout to fill in on the lesson. I don't know if anybody need one of those. You guys can raise your hand. You got it? Got them all out and everything? Okay. And I appreciate the reading of the Hebrews 12, 14 through 15. I have 17. I don't know why they're 14 and 15 is what was read. So. But we've been caring for kids for 64 years, and most come from troubled family situations. Things just are not going well. That makes sense in the sense of why children would be referred to the children's home. Things are not going well. They really don't want to come to the children's home. You can imagine, how many children do you think are just raising their hand and say, hey, I want to come to a children's home? That's not realistic. You know, I mean, they're going through some hard times, and it's hard to even think about being placed or, you know, going to a children's home. But they all realize that there's something that they need something. They need help. And they want to be loved. They want to be held, you know, they want to be part of a family. But when they come into the children's home, we're strangers. You know, they have their wall up. They're very cautious in regards to who we are and what's going to happen, and I'm sure there's a lot of fear and trust that enters into all of that. But as I, you know, have networked with the churches to the north and northwest, you know, I see that you help us to demonstrate that there's a different way of life than what they may have been brought up with, and helping them to begin to trust in proper authority figures and that security and that structure and what good that may come from, and that's how I see, you know, that the churches, how they help us to do what we do, you know, and But when I look at this, you recognize what James 1:27 is all about. And it says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this. It's to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. I take a look at this, I kind of single out some words here. Orphan has a broader meaning than what we typically think. When we think of orphan, we think of both parents are deceased. But when you look at Vine's Expository Dictionary, it's broader than that. It's one who is fatherless. And we see in some Bible versions it uses fatherless instead of orphan. One who is comfortless, that can't find comfort. One who is friendless. They have no one to turn to. And then the word desolate seems to kind of bring about a stronger meaning in the sense of, if you feel like you have no one to turn to. I take a look at, people ask me, well, is it true that all your kids or both parents are deceased? And I says, well, no, I've been in child care for 42 years, and I probably could maybe say there's about 8 or 10 that where both parents are deceased. But you have to take a look at, we have a lot of parents out there that really don't want to take their kids. So are they orphaned in that sense? There's no one there to train them, no one to teach them. And then you can take a look at in regards to which you think is more difficult, to have your parents both deceased or to have your parents alive and not want you. Which one is more difficult? And a lot of times we have to deal with that because children want their parents to love them and to care for them. And, it's kind of like no matter what they do, they can't get that. And it just leads them on in that way. Now, and then you take a look at the word to visit. The version I read says to look after. Other versions talk about to visit. And if you look at, again, through Vines, it's that you identify with the child. You understand what they're going through. You become one with them. It's not only the orphan, it's the widow also. You identify with them, and you become one with them. You take up their cause. You take them by the hand, and you help them through whatever difficulty that they have, because they're friendless, they're desolate. That's when you reach out and help them, and these are things that are practicing pure religion, isn't it? It's one of the things, don't pollute your world with sin or your life with sin, but the other is to look after orphans and widows. And then it goes on in regards to, do you do that when things are really good? Well, no, it's when there's affliction, when they are in distress, and when they need it the most. And that's where I see a lot of times what we do at the children's home is reaching out and not just patting them on the back and saying hi to them, but it's you help them through a hard time. And I think we can apply that to probably your community. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and how you reach out and take up their cause and help them. But I want you to stop and think about, have you ever felt desolate? We probably don't think about that too much. We could be desolate in the sense of legally. We may be in trouble in regards to friendless. Who do we turn to? Financially, we may get ourselves into financial problems and situations, and that you feel pretty desolate in that situation. But the thing that I probably refer to, I think that we can all identify, is if you're driving a car and you're out in the middle of nowhere and your car stalls, in regards to you feel pretty desolate. Who do you turn to? You feel pretty friendless. And I, as I mentioned in class, I grew up in eastern Montana, and there's a lot of space, between towns, and you can feel pretty desolate. Each year, what I do, I go to the Montana lectureship, and there's probably about 14, 16 churches in Montana that I bring them change cans to this lectureship, and because it's a real convenient and efficient way, because I can go to the lectureship and the preachers and elders come and members come to that lectureship, and I pass out change cans, boxes of change cans in the spring. But then in the fall, I go to the Bismarck lectureship, and there's a lot of Montana preachers that come from, they go to the Bismarck lectureship. So they gather up the cans and they bring them to me in Bismarck, and it just helps me to coordinate and make that work. Well, I mentioned I grew up in Fairview, Montana. That's where my parents were, and I would go to the Bismarck lectureship, and then I'd stop by my parents and spend a few days, and then I'd head back to Colorado. Well, one year I bought a motor and a transmission. I mentioned my dad was a mechanic, and I do a lot of different things. And I bought a motor and transmission for my van that had 285,000 miles on it. It was kind of like, I know it's going to croak one day. So I thought, well, I'll change it out, and I have that. So I got a real good deal on it. And so the next year I come through, and I thought, what I'll do is I'll take a pickup, I'll go to the Bismarck lectureship, and then I'll go visit my parents, pick up the motor, and then I'll drive back to Colorado. So I did that, and I run on donated cars. The children's home all the time, and we had this Toyota pickup that had 335,000 miles on it. And I thought, well, I can take that pickup. It'd be efficient. It does, it run good and everything. And but it was a pickup that was. You ever seen those old Toyota pickups that the fender wells are all rusted out? The motor keeps running, but they're just, it's kind of like, are the fenders going to hang on because they're just rusted out? Well, anyway, I took it and went to the Bismarck lectureship, and then I went and visited my parents. I picked up the motor, and I was driving back. And there's a space of time, from Miles City, Montana to Gillette, Wyoming. There's about 160 miles. That there's nothing out there but antelope. That's about all there is. Have you identified with that? Yeah, okay. And has anybody stopped at Biddle, Montana? Well, I was cruising along with this pickup, and the thing has just started chugging and missing. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to have car problems out here in the middle of nowhere, And I was coming to the border between Montana and Wyoming, and then I was chugging along about 10 miles that was just missing. And I pulled in Biddle, Montana. There's about 4 houses, I think, in a gas station, a little pump in a convenience store. And I pulled in there, and I popped up the hood, and I started pulling the spark plug wires, trying to diagnose which cylinder was missing, and maybe I could figure out what to do with it. And I found out which one wasn't working, and then I thought, oh no, I forgot to bring tools. My dad always told me to bring tools when you're on the road, So I was, thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? But then here come this guy with his pickup, and I asked him, I said, do you have a spark plug wrench I could borrow? He said, yeah. So he got his tools out, and I was saying, okay, I'll pull the spark plug out, and it's going to be that little hook, it's on there, and it can corrode up, and I thought you could clean it up and you could put it back in, and I can go on down. Well, when I pulled the spark plug out, that hook was gone. There was nothing there to clean. I was done, and I was starting to feel a little more desperate. And so I walked into the store, and I was holding the spark plug, and I said, do you have any spark plugs in this store? He says, yeah, we got a shelf back over there. And so I went back there, and it was about a shelf about that long with spark plugs. And I started going through all of the boxes, comparing the numbers to find the right number. And I was sitting there, I couldn't find anything. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, great. This is Montana, Wyoming ranch country. Big 4-wheel drive Fords and Chevys and Dodges, not little Toyota pickups. It was going through my mind, and I just thought, oh no, I need to start looking more. So I moved these boxes around, looked all over, and there was one spark plug of the exact number that I needed. Now, I can't say for sure God put that there, but I sure thanked him for it, because I was grateful, and made sure I got the other 3 spark plugs changed out when I got back home. But I started feeling pretty desperate, in regards to who do you turn to, where do I go? And I take a look at that situation as short term versus a child that grows up in a home where there's brokenness and things not working right, and that's more long term and more can affect the child. I think we can all identify, especially for women that may be out on the road and a car stalls. Who do you turn to? Who do you have friends? Who can you trust? And especially in our world today. Let's turn to Matthew 25:34. We're familiar with this passage. And it's about where the Son of Man comes in his glory. And it's when he's separating the sheep and the goats. So Matthew 25:34. It says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the big creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you come to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or need clothing and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in a prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me.'" Here the righteous were saying, well, we don't remember going and visiting you in prison. We don't remember bringing you water or clothing that you've needed. We don't remember that. But Jesus, isn't he mindful of whatever we do? He knows our every thought. He knows our every acts of kindness. And it's like doing it to him. Children's homes have changed over the years, I think, as typically we think of children's homes providing the basic care, basic needs, the food, shelter, and water, or food, shelter, and clothing. But you know what I want to say? These are the easier things that we do in helping the children who come into our care. We spend much more time in regards to helping them to work through the emotional issues, the loss of the family connection, or even if there's abuse and neglect, and in providing them that emotional support and spiritual help. Children all love their families, and they hope that things will get better, but they have been hurt, they have been wounded, and that's where we spend a lot of time in helping them to work through that. If I ask in regards to how many of us have been wounded, I would say that probably every one of us will raise our hands in regards to, in some one way or another, we have been wounded. And if when we've been wounded, what happens is the hurt, it can turn into anger, and then it can turn into resentment, and then it can turn into bitterness if we don't address that. I went to a seminar, my wife and I did. Here we go. I'm sorry about that. I let you fill in the blanks there. I got ahead of myself here. But one of the things that we went to the seminar, and it presented this flow chart that it was just like, wow, this is what our children are going through. And it's the stages of a wounded spirit. And it takes off, regarding, the wounded spirit. A child is wounded by mom, dad, both, whatever. Maybe a father's absent and not around. There could be abuse, neglect, selfishness from a parent or not, But if that wound is not addressed, then what happens is the next stage is there's alienation of affection. The child will start pulling away from their parents. And there can be silence at the dinner table. There can be retreating to their room. And there's just not that connection. And you can start seeing this flow chart, what happens. And then what happens is that if the wound is kept going and going on, they start alienating their affection. They do their alienating affection, and then there's a rejection of authority. I know I'm supposed to love my parents, but look what they keep doing to me, or they're gone. And they start justifying and weighing that scale, kind of like, I know I'm supposed to love them, but then look what they keep doing, and pretty soon the scale tips. And they struggle with that, and they start rejecting authority. But I want to take this to even a broader thing, rather than just children. I want you to apply it to marriages. If your spouse wounds you, what happens is that you become more distant. That your spouse will alienate your affection and not be as close to you. Or you can take this in regards to apply it to a wounded member within the church. A member of the church who wounds you, then what happens is you start alienating your affection, and you start going down this same course as what a child is. I'm talking about children, but we're children ourselves, and we follow the same thing. So it starts off with a wounded spirit. Then it goes to alienation, affection. Can become stubborn. And then the next stage is rejection of authority. And if you reject authority, somebody has to be in a position of authority. And what happens is I see a child start putting themselves in a position of authority. Rather than being under parental authority, they start putting themselves up equal to authority or over authority, and they start making decisions in disregard and minimize parental authority. So when they establish themselves as authority, I mean, they start making decisions, the same thing as us. If we're wounded as a spouse, if we're wounded as a member, we start making choices that are, I know God wants me to do this, but look what they keep doing. As a member, you can see that we go down the same route. So when you reject authority, the next one is establish themselves authority, and then they turn to their friends for support. That's what we see a lot of children who come into the children's home. They start flocking to other children who are of the like mindset, who have come from the same homes, and they develop that support system. And then you can take this in regards to a wounded member. A wounded member say, well, do you know what so-and-so did over here? You start recruiting your support system to justify what you have experienced and these wounds can be real or they can be perceived wounds too, which have become real to you, right? And so you turn to your friends for support. And then the next behavior, what I see with children is they move into sensual behavior. It could be drugs, alcohol, sex. It could be cussing a teacher out. It could be cussing a parent off, walking off thinking like, well, I really got it in power. You just feel all built up because you just told somebody off. You move into sensual behavior. It could be drugs, alcohol. There's no doubt in regards to the sensual behavior is to try to cover the wound, and that sensual behavior does that. But then what happens in the next stage is there's guilt. When you start doing those things and you start doing things that are against God, you start feeling guilty. And then when you feel guilty, you got to do more sensual things to cover the wound. And I see kids are caught in that cycle around and around, and they don't know how to get out of it. I've showed this to parents before, and parents have just, kind of glossed over, and they said, well, that's me. That was me. I presented that this is what's going on with your child, but they'll say, well, that was me. That's what I was doing with my parents, You could almost see generational passed down if the wounds aren't addressed. And so it's a cycle, and what we see at the children's home, we got to take them back to the real wound, what's triggered it all, and help all the symptoms. Because what we spend more time on in regards to is all the symptoms and never get down to the real root of what's going on and addressing that. Satan is a master of deception. He loves to ensnare a child from an early age because they're not equipped to know how to deal with that. We as a parent, as adults, a lot of times don't know how to deal with that. If he can get them to focus on their bitterness, then he may have them for this lifetime, and he will have them for eternity. Definition of bitterness is harboring resentment for things that others have done to you. Again, that could be real or perceived, but it's an entrenched animosity, which is really a hatred toward another person. It's to make fast to fix to cling tenaciously to. Have you ever been feeling like you, or have a feeling of bitterness of how it is hard to let go because it keeps coming back over and over? It just clings to you. One of the things that most of the children I see who come into the children's home, when I used to be in the interviewing of the process, and we'd have the mother or father or whoever had parental custody of the child. And then we have the house parents and the counselors and that. And I would kind of sit back and just for about 20 minutes, just kind of observe what was going on between the parent and the child and see some of the dysfunction that might be going on there. And I would start asking the child, are you angry? No, I'm not angry. You frustrated with anything? No, I'm not. And then I'll ask them the questions. How have you been wounded? And there's something about that question. If I ask you, it goes to the heart. We can kind of blow off the other things, but if I come up and ask you, how have you been wounded? Your mind just takes you immediately to the heart. And you can see the child, what do you mean? Now, what do you wish your dad would do? What do you wish your mother would do, or what, the wounds, and then tears come to their eyes, and then a lot of times you can just ask them, well, what's behind those tears? And that's when they start pouring out. Well, I just wish I had a dad. I've had 3 dads, and nobody wants to play ball with me. Nobody wants to be in my life. And you start getting down to what the real wound is. They don't recognize it. They may not want to admit to the wound. They don't want to communicate the wound because it's too painful. How many times do we don't want to talk about the wound because it's just too painful? We'd rather just put it on a shelf and not talk about it. They don't want to let go of it. Sometimes they want to hang on to it because it's a revenge. If my parents only know how angry I am, then they surely will change. Well, that may not be the case. But there's a hope in regards to kind of manipulate the parent to take more responsibility and address it. They give excuses. They create behavior that keeps them from really looking at what the real wound is in their own behavior. But they also create behaviors so that we as parents, we don't recognize what the real wound is. We're dealing with all the symptoms of the wound. Let's turn to Hebrews 12, 14 and 15. Appreciated the scripture being read, and it talks about bitterness. Hebrews 12, 14 and 15. It says, "Make every effort to live in peace with all men, and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." I take a look at this, and the verse starts off in verse 14. It says to make every effort. Well, Lord, we want to bargain with the Lord. Well, Lord, I'll make some effort toward this person, but you don't realize what this person has really done. But it says, no, make every effort. It's a sacrificial thing, isn't it? And it's, in regards to live peacefully with all men. Well, Lord, how about the ones that I like? I'll get along with the ones that I get along with, but I don't want to get along with others. It's just so. But it says, make every effort to live peacefully with all men. And I realize that we make this effort, but other people have a choice in regards to how they respond to it. But we have that responsibility from Scripture. To be holy, peace and holiness go together. Being holy reflects God's character. And children come from situations where there has been no peace in their life. And if we want peace, true peace, then we have to know holiness. And we know holiness, and to be able to be holy, we have to know God. And as we get to know God and His love and His grace and His holiness and incorporate that, that's when we can have peace. And the verse goes on, and it continues in regards to without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Verse 15, it starts off and it says, see to it. I don't know if your parents ever said that to you, but if they said that to you, what did that mean? It's a top priority. You better take a look at it. See to it. See to it. What? And we have to take responsibility for it. See to it. Goes on and says, so no one misses the grace of God. Whoa. I have a responsibility here in that sense. We must understand the true principle of grace, His love and His favor to us, because failing to understand this can lead us to a bitter spirit, and we will miss out on the grace of God. See to it. It's kind of hard to hold bitterness toward another person for what they have done or what they've wounded us, when God gives us His love and His grace, His forgiveness. And boy, we really want that, but it's hard for us to give it to someone else, isn't it? It's hard. And it's when we truly understand that, Him showing His mercy and His grace, it's really hard to hold it against another person. The see to it goes on and it says, and see to it that no root of bitterness grows up to cause trouble and to defile many. There is a lady that came out to campus, and we live in a semi-arid area, not like here where you got trees growing all over and grass, whatever. We have to work at trying to plant trees and stuff. And she lived downtown Denver, and she said, I want to come out and beautify the campus. I want to make the campus to look beautiful. And if you go to her yard in her house, the flowers and trees, everything was just trimmed, and there wasn't a weed in sight. Nothing. It was just really, but she was in the middle of Denver, okay? So we're 3 miles out of town, north of Longmont, out in the country, and she started planting flower beds, trees, drip systems, and really beautifying the campus. That's what she wanted to do. And she said, well, I'm going to come out and work on the flower beds. Well, she came out and worked on the flower beds, but she says, I didn't understand what creeping Jenny was. I don't know if about here, if you have creeping Jenny, you probably have something else, but in Montana we called it, there was creeping Jenny, there was morning glory, bindweed. I guess Colorado calls it bindweed. It doesn't need water. It doesn't have to have good soil. It just grows up, and it just, you hoe it, you spray it, you pull it, you do whatever you can to try, but it just grows, and it doesn't need any nutrients. It just takes over. And I'm not sure if you do have that here in Nebraska. At least when I lived in York, I didn't remember that. But it just choked. And what happens is it just becomes our focal point. The bindweed. When you go out to the flower bed, it's always addressing the bindweed, and we spend all of our time on it, and it chokes out the good, and it chokes out the beauty of the flowers. And we must understand how bitterness can become our focal point, just like that bindweed. And our focus needs to be on hope that we have in Jesus Christ. If you go back to Hebrews 12 in regards to the beginning of that, our focus needs to be on Jesus and not on the bitterness. And bitterness can take and consume our time and our focus, and how it can spread and how it can consume us and how it can destroy us and destroy others. And I take a look at what opportunity we have to help children who are in the grip of the master of deception because of their wound. One who loves to deceive, one who loves to choke out life, and they can't see God and His truth. And I take a look at what an opportunity we have to help them to see God and His grace and His holiness and the peace that comes from that. Ephesians 4:31-32, it says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. These are some of the things that grieve the Holy Spirit in the passages, verses right ahead of this. So taking a look at in regards to conclusion, to master bitterness, we must understand God and accept God's principle of His love and His grace and His mercy that He shows to us. There's two things I think taken from this lesson in regards to we must understand how bitterness can become our focal point and consume us. We live in a wounded world. We don't have to go outside of this building to find wounded people. And we have something to offer. Christ has something to offer. We offer to inform them of that, but we have the opportunity to help others to get through the wounds that they have. But the other thing that we need to be mindful of is that we need to make sure that we do not wound others so they do not miss out on the grace of God. We can say things, we can do things that will cause other people to be wounded, and they will miss out on the grace of God. I don't think we think about that too much, by our actions, making sure that what we do is godly and that we don't wound other people. Every child is at the mercy of someone to care for them, to look after them, and they look for someone to provide for them, to care for them, to love them, and yes, even discipline them. I talked about that in class today. And behind all of the hurt and the pain, they are just like you and me. They're trying to survive the best that they can with what skills that they have. I want to say just thank you for your support. If you identify with our children, you can identify with our children. You can take up their cause, and you become one with them. And I just appreciate you guys very much hearing what I'm saying in regards to what the Children's Home does. You help us to heal the wounds, to break Satan's grip of deception, create a new vision and a new hope so they don't miss out on the grace of God. And I'm just grateful for the church and people who help us so that our kids don't miss out on the grace of God. I want to close with a story that there was I mentioned in our class, there was Coloradans, a car club that has a car show that come out on our campus. And they give the benefits to the Children's Home. But anyway, one year I had Terry Campbell called. He was the chair or the president of the club. And he says, Randy, we would like to have you come out and choose a car. And we want to call it Mountain States Children's Home's Choice, And he said, can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And, hung up on the phone, and it didn't settle with me. And I called him back, and I said, Terry, I can't do that. But what I'd rather have is have one of the kids choose a car and not me. Anyway, Adri was a girl that came in that we really questioned whether we take her in or not, because she was a professed atheist. I don't believe in God. And I was sitting there thinking, well, do we really take somebody in that is just such a professed atheist? Well, we have an on-ground school, and we have Bible every morning. Janice was the head of our educational director for the school and taught. And it wasn't very long before she started asking Janice in regards to what's the Bible say about heaven, and asking other questions. And you see, she just didn't know what the Word said. And it wasn't very long before she was baptized. Anyway, I recommended that we have Adri go out and choose the car. She had a colorful personality. It was just kind of fun to be around her, actually. And when I told her that, she was all excited. Yeah, I would like to do this. So we went out to the car show. There was 300 cars. And up and down the rows, we were looking at all these cars. I like this one, Randy. I like this one here. This is great. Oh, it was just, and I was sitting there thinking, okay, Adri, we need to probably narrow this down to 5 cars, not 300, And so she chose 5 cars. They weren't cars that I would choose. There were some, I would choose 57 Chevy or something like that. But she had some, Willys and DeSotos that were kind of weird looking. They were strange, but they were cool cars, but they weren't my choices, And so she chose 5. And I said, what you need to do is take one, and what they're going to do is they're going to line up the cars that the one you chose, and then you're going to be able to give the trophy to them as they drive the car through. You're going to give it to the owner of the car. And so we were walking back, and she stopped at this 72 Nova. Primer gray. The fenders were rusted out like that Toyota truck that I talked about. The seats were just torn up. The hood was open and the motor was painted orange, okay? I give it credit for that. And she just kept looking at this car, and I was sitting there thinking, Adri, there's all kinds of nice cars out here. Nice paint jobs, superchargers, leg pipes. There's really nice cars. And she just kept looking at this, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, great. If she chooses this car, it's going to be Mountain States Choice. This piece of junk that we'll be going through, And I walked over to her and said, we need to get your car taken. She says, well, Randy, I want to choose this one. Because it has potential just like me. Makes you realize what kids can say to you to really kind of wake you up. There was no doubt why that car went through with the other cars. I told Terry, I said, this is why she chose this car. Aren't we thankful that we have a God that gives us grace, and that He can make us new again, just like that old car, but much better, in regards to the sin in our lives and what we do and how He can make us new again. because of the love that He has for us. And aren't we thankful for His grace and His mercy? There may be somebody here that realizes that you're struggling with some bitterness, and you know that it's just hanging to you, and you need to let go of it so God can really work within you. Or you may feel like that car, there's sin in your life, and you realize, well, how am I ever going to be made new again? But God has a way of doing that through Christ, and aren't we thankful for that? You know, whatever the need is, I know this church would be willing to help you in whatever way. I see how friendly you guys are and how you love each other and how important that is in a congregation. But, you know, whatever the need is, you know, let us know and let the congregation know as we stand and sing.